So, welcome back to the second part of the lecture. This part is more about advanced filters. You saw that you get a lot of blurring from the images, and sometimes, or usually, don't want to blur your images unnecessarily. And especially if you have very low signal-to-noise ratio, it's difficult to handle that with convolution filters or medium filters. And the approach is now to work on different scales. So you can have to take care of different scales of the noise structure. And that can bring you pretty much further. One thing you can do is using the wavelets. And in principle, what the wavelet does is you transform the image into a trend part and one detail part, and at different scales. That can be used then for doing noise reduction. You can even use it for analysis, segmentation, compression. For the compression, the most known one is probably JPEG compression, which is more or less wavelet based. You can even see it. I'll show you what you can see afterwards. But looking at the decomposition of an image or data, you have first of all, first here the original data, a long signal. That one you split into two parts. One, which gives you the trend. You can see it's less noisy, but it's also shorter. And then you have the detail, which is more or less the noise components. You don't see much else in this one. Then you take the trend and split it again into one new trend, which is shorter, and one detail, again also shorter. And then you can continue like that, well, until you have no more data, but usually don't go that far. And if you go into an image, you can't do it into two parts, but you actually do four parts. So you take the original image, then you have the trend, and then you have vertical information, horizontal information, and diagonal information. And then you take the trend again, and that into a new set of images, and that can continue also for a long time, at least as long as you have pixels to reduce. In principle, what the transform is, you have convolutions of base functions that are used. There are very many base functions for different purposes. Some are better for compression, some are better for noise suppression, and there is a whole library of different kinds of base functions for the wavelet transform. And actually, let's go back another one. If you look up those two, you can have more overview. The Walker book is easier. It's more introduction to wavelets. And Mala is, well, the big Bible. So it's a pretty thick book, and he covers most of the aspects of the wavelets. So looking at a real image, or, well, a constructed image in this case, but anyway, an image, what does the wavelet transform look like of that? I have now put all the steps together, so these detail parts, you can see here, you can only see the horizontal information. Here you can only see the vertical information, and here, well, faintly, you can see the diagonal information. So for example, the cross here, you almost don't see it at all, but the rings on the different branches, you can see at least the 45-degree information. Also, on this double ring, you can also see the 45-degree information, but not the horizontal information. The spiral is a little bit special, then you have always a little bit information. It's more details in it. So, when I did this transform, first I took the first step, then I transformed again the trend, then I came with these, took again the trend, and got these, and here is the final trend image. And the idea is that when you have done this decomposition, you should also be able to come back, otherwise it doesn't make much sense. And that is how we can do, for example, noise reduction. The idea here is I do the decomposition. The trend is the information I want. I want to do a low-pass filtering. Then I look into the details and say all variations that are less than a certain threshold, I don't want them. So I just cut them out, and after thresholding, the detail looks like this. And when I combine them back again, you can see that there is a smoothing effect on this profile here. And we have achieved what we want to do. Here's a practical example. Pretty noisy data, actually. Was a hard example to measure. It is actually a LED scroll, which I did with neutron imaging. LED for neutrons is relatively transparent, so almost too transparent actually. And that make it easy to see through it. I did the experiment. I had made a LED scroll where I put in a piece of paper, and it was the paper that gave me the highest signal. When I tried to filter this one with the wavelet, you can see that I can get out the noise. Well, good. I can still see some of the structures. Maybe I did too strong filtering. But the interesting thing is these wavelet artifacts that you can see on some places, like small ripples along at some spots. You can see it better actually on the screen if you have it in front of you. So there is a good noise cancelling effect, but you can, if you don't watch out, using the wrong base function, the wrong number of levels, and also the thresholds, you can come into these artifacts. In the beginning, it's a lot of trial and error, getting acquainted with using different base functions, getting also sense for how many levels do I need. It's actually coupled to how detailed your image is. If you have very small features, you can't go too many levels because then you cancel them on the way, which you don't want to. In MATLAB, you have also a Wavelets Toolbox. That's an extra toolbox actually, so you can't have it in the basic pack. But on the site license here, I think it should be available, so it's no problem. It's more if you have standalone license on your laptop, then you have to buy that toolbox separately. So that was the basic idea, getting into scales, looking at different levels, trying to extract information in that. The next step is to looking at filters based on partial differential equations. And here are some filter examples, a diffusion filter or a total variation filter, where you can really remove much of the texture noise and still preserve, as you can see here and here, preserve the edges very well. This wouldn't be possible to do with median or with convolution filters. That you really have to forget. One characteristic look of these images, they look very patchy, and that's then where you come into working with tweaking and tuning of these filters. Very good overview is in this book, Aubert and Kompos. Have a very good, I think there are even in the later versions, there are even source code examples for using these filters. The book only covers the 2D case, but it's not so difficult actually to go to 3D. It's memory consuming, but it's not so difficult. So the starting point, when we're talking about differential equations, the first idea that people started working with was looking at the heat transport equation. And we take the image, is T here, which is the intensity corresponding to temperature. Then we have some thermal conduction capacity. And, well, we iterate this to get some solution. As you can see here, I have this original image. And let's wait. There you can see. If I let it run to infinity, you see that the whole image will be diffused into a constant gray level, which is not what we want. It's pretty fast that it actually goes into a very smooth image. Doesn't really help us. So we have to do something else. And that is by controlling the diffusivity parameter, the kappa, in the equation previously. And what we want to is to have a diffusivity close to 0 at the edges, and in the flat regions, or relative flat regions, we want a 1. So it's diffusing a lot within the flat regions. And I didn't put up any reference on that, but I think it was Per-Ona Malik who introduced that kind of a thresholding, smooth thresholding actually. So having this function, and by tuning the parameter, you can actually set threshold level, which is the lambda, and n is the steepness. And by that, you can control the diffusivity of the function. And looking at that, we have the original image, and for that image, we would get the diffusivity map looking like this. White means a lot of filtering, and black means block, so no filtering at all. And this looks good on the first sight, but the problem is finding the edges is noise sensitive, because that's a high-pass filter. So if you have very high noise peaks, that will actually disturb you. So what they needed to do was to smooth the gradient information in this equation, and then you have a stable gradient map, and a diffusivity map, sorry. And doing that, you can see on this movie some iterations. It's a little bit slow in the beginning, but after a while you can see, well, now it starts getting more patchy. And I stopped, sorry. But anyway, you could smooth the images pretty much better using this style compared to first the linear filters, and also compared to the pure diffusion. I got back. So, and then mathematicians are never satisfied, so they continue. So they came into the total variation work and more regularization-based filtering, where you try to minimize this expression, where you have one noise term and the bounded variation, which is essentially the sum of the absolute gradients, and then the fidelity, how much are you relating back to the original image, and that one should be very good and the other one should be reduced. And one filter method that is really amazing how it works is the very long name Rudin Olsher-Fatemi model, usually abbreviated by ROF. And these guys, they actually also produced a framework for inverse scale space. So normally when we look, we take the small features in the smoothing first and then go to larger features. The idea of inverse scale space, turn it all up, and first you add large features in the image and then you let it grow into the smaller ones. And that's more relevant actually for the enhancement of noisy images, because you want to see the large features. And the ISS filter is, first of all, very good at being edge preserving. It's based on partial differential equations, and it also have a pretty good termination point, depending on how you implement it. The equation looks like this. We have the image, so you have a curvature part, and this is the fidelity part, and then you have the regularization parameters here to make the whole equation robust. Actually, there are 4 parameters that you have to tune and select in this filter, which makes it a bit difficult in the beginning to work with, but you can get really nice results. You can see in this piece, it's a piece of lung, which was noisy in the beginning, was very low density, but it's possible really to filter it. You can see the edge here is very sharp. I'm over smoothing a bit around this place, but this also show that you can, in some sense, also over filter if you don't watch out. Oh, there is something weird going on. Well, I'm showing here some places on the iterations. So I let the filter run for several iterations, 1,000 in this case. At first we have a noisy case, and then starting filtering, 60 iterations, 100 iterations. And then you see up here there is a turning point in the error curve, and then it actually goes back again to the noisy one. So normally when we do filtering, we look at this region. It's pretty fast to reach, and then it's a question how strong filter effect you want to achieve. This curve can also have different shapes depending on what kind of initial information you have. In this case, I started with the original image. You can also start with a 0 or a 1 image, and in that case, you would go from very different down to what is essentially only the noise level in the image. A new thing that started developing also, it's a pretty fascinating idea actually, is normally when you do the smoothing, doesn't matter how you do it, the things I showed you until now, they work on the neighborhood of a pixel and do some filtering on that. So for the convolution, you look at local averages, so that's what we looked at before. And now I show you some PDE filters where you look at gradients and curvatures. The non-local smoothing is looking at trying to average intensities that are similar to each other. So it takes a pixel, compares it to another one somewhere in the image. Okay, we have about the same intensity, we smooth together. And that makes also a very nice filtering effect. Wavelets introduced this one in 2005, and it was interesting results actually. The filter equations, well, it is in principle a weighted averaging from the pixel intensities, and it's relatively straightforward to implement. You don't have to do any differential equation solver or anything. It's more or less just weights and sums, nothing else. And the result you can get out of it is something like that. Coming back to the left scroll again, a lot of noise, some rings. And looking at the filter results, you see there is a very patchy smoothing in this area, but the rings in the 2D case, they remain. So the filter is actually preserving very sharp features. In this case, I got some I didn't want to keep, but that's a side effect. But I get out the noise very well, and also if you look at the difference image between them, you see that there is essentially only noise and some ring information. So it's a very good smoothing effect. It's very strong and strong thin lines. They are preserved, as you can see here. So if you have very thin features, this filter will actually preserve it. And on the beamer you can't see it, but there is some patchiness, and that's related to the implementation, which I'm going to mention next. The problem is that the complexity of this filter is order n squared, so every pixel has to be compared with every pixel, which takes a lot of time, and for 3D images I would say it takes too long time. Already doing this example here took several minutes on my laptop, so it's not useful in that sense. The solution is to look for non-locality in a smaller region, and then we come to this small patches, the omega I for every pixel position. And then you can do it much faster. There are also different approaches to speed it up, and that is what the ongoing research is about around this filter, because it does produce really good results, and I personally started looking at it just last fall, so I haven't looked into it very much yet. The last part is about verification. When you do experiments or process the data, it's important to know that you actually do the right thing. And therefore we need to verify how correct it is performing. And my boss, he coined the phrase data massage. So like this man in the pottery forming his clay into mugs, he forms everyone into mugs. He wants that. We don't, with image processing, you shouldn't form it into what you want and what you expect. You should form it into what is really there. And with all these filters I have shown you, you can introduce strong filter effects. You can even introduce new image features if you don't watch out, and that is important to avoid. So how do you inspect it? First thing is actually use your eyes, visual inspection. Look at the screen, does it really make sense? If it doesn't pass that test, it's time to look for something new. The next thing is, I already showed you difference images. So you compute the difference between the original and the filtered one, and then you can see the effects. The really big one is the working on phantom data, which you degrade and see what comes out afterwards. So here are some examples with verification using difference images. If you have some noisy image, in the ideal case, the difference between the filtered image and the original should be just the noise. It rarely is, actually. If you do oversmoothing, then you will start seeing edges and structures in the image, which is not expected. And that means maybe you can tweak it a little bit, trying to optimize the ratio between smoothing and edge preserving. You can even in the filter do intensity scaling, so you actually change the gray levels. In some cases, that can be acceptable, but not if you're trying to quantify the gray level information in the data. Geometric shift, then you actually displace the original from the filtered data from the original, and that should actually not be. So that's more about an implementation error. And that gives you also a visual way of seeing it. Then we can come into different metrics. First of all, performance testing using the smoke test. In principle, that was something I learned with electronics, that when you have built your device, you want to see that it works, okay? Plug in different currents and see how it persists against different settings, and if something gets hot, something is wrong. It makes smoke. So, no good idea. So then you have to test it again. And it's about the same principle here. You provoke your filter or analysis method until it smokes. And that's the time where you have your breakdown point. The test strategy is, first of all, you create a phantom, something you know. Could be a very good example of a real data, or it could also be a complete numeric phantom of something. And the next step is you add noise with different signal noise ratio. Maybe you even smooth it a little bit to make it even more difficult. And then you apply your processing method to with different parameter settings and measure the difference between the original, the phantom that you produced, and the process data. And preferably, since we're talking about noise, it's good to repeat it several times and getting more statistics about the performance. And finally, plot it as a result with different signal noise ratio and error, and using different metrics. And here, one classic one is the mean squared error. We just take the mean squared sum of the difference. Or else you can also use structural similarity index, which is more sensitive to the information in the image. So here you have the correlation is involved, local standard deviation, and then you need a couple of parameters that actually are given in this publication here. It's, by the way, a very nice paper. I think it's one of the top rated at IEEE signal processing. So here is an example. Here I created a test structure. Should be kind of root system with different thickness of structures. Then I added noise at different levels and started processing. Actually, the whole sequence was about seeing how much of the structure I could segment. So it's these breakdown plots here, they actually include also the segmentation. And here you can see that the first case breaks down relatively fast, especially at lower signal to noise ratio, and then some others, they produce better and better. And you can see, then you get the operating space for your filter method. Then you know, if it's that noisy, you can forget it. Or if it's not noisy, it's great. That brings me to the end. I have shown you a very large amount of different filters to produce different filtering effects. Here I give you a little bit of an overview of all these filters and how they perform at different signal to noise ratio. I even give you some metrics. Here you can see the mean squared error and the structure similarity index metric. Going down here, you can see also how the different filter types. I have here the box filter, medium filter, wavelet filter, nonlinear diffusion, and the ISS filter, total variation. Actually, I didn't add the non-local means. I haven't had the time to do that, but it would also show similar behavior. And looking at the details in these phantom images, you can see that the box filter actually is introducing a lot of smoothing. The medium filter cuts off the corners to begin with. The wavelet filter looks good here, and well, these three they look pretty acceptable actually. Then when you add noise, coming down to the really bad case, it's difficult to see the structures really and where the boundaries are. And the box filter doesn't perform really good. You can get a really blobby result. And it's first when you come to the nonlinear diffusion or the ISS filter that you have really good smoothing with sharp regions. You can see this crispiness around the edges, and that's an effect of that I didn't choose the best version of the diffusion filter here. Since we have no diffusivity along the edges, there is no filter effect, and that is exactly what we see here. And there are versions of the diffusion filters that actually also smooth along the edges, but I didn't use that here. So, I'm about at the end. Some take-home message. We have looked at, first of all, different noises, artifacts, and then following up with different ways of suppressing these effects to get as nice information as possible from the data. We have looked at convolution, we have looked at median, wavelet denoising, PDE denoising, and which method you choose depends on purpose of the data, what are you going to do with it, how sharp do you need the data, which quality requirements do you have, and not to forget available time, because some of these more advanced filters take some time to process. And that also has to be counted into the whole selection. And very important, no filtering process can replace a good measurement. We can actually rescue data which are not so good, and sometimes during the experiment we want to push the limits, but then there are methods that can take care of the data. So, thank you. One thing I forgot. All the references are also in the list. I think I'm done. Now it's for you to work and play around a little bit. I think Kevin has prepared some exercises for you. And we will run around in the room.